Hey there! Did you know Kroger always gives you savings and rewards on top of our lower-than-low prices? And when you download the Kroger app, you'll enjoy over $500 in savings every week with digital coupons. And don't forget fuel points to help you save up to $1 per gallon at the pump. Want to save even more? With a Boost membership, you'll get double fuel points and free delivery. So shop and save big at Kroger today. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Savings may vary by state. Restrictions apply. See site for details.
This episode is brought to you by Pepsi Wild Cherry. Pepsi Wild Cherry is bursting with delicious cherry flavor and a sweet, crisp taste that gives you more to go wild for. Getting wild may look different these days, but whether it's opting for a solo Friday binge watch or a big night out, everyone can indulge in their wild side with Pepsi Wild Cherry. Also available in Zero Sugar. So grab a Pepsi Wild Cherry and get wild.
Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our Quick Publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. And welcome to an Anfield Index special, ladies and gents. So this is the first episode of The Next Dance. There's obviously great sadness that Jurgen Klopp's reign is set to end in the near future, but looking forward, who is going to be the main man? How will they work with others? What will the squad think of them? There's many questions to be answered, as well as who do we even think it could be? So in the first of this series, the person on the block, the people's choice, as it were, is Xabi Alonso, who we'll be reviewing in full. And I am delighted to say that, as the old saying goes, 2 Daves are better than one. So with me having little to minimal knowledge, put it that way, of the Bundesliga, Dave Hendrick is here to join me to offer his insight and expertise. Dave, how are we?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I'm back among the world of the living, so that's nice.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know it's not been 100% for you recently, but we haven't got time for that, Dave. We need your expertise. We need your answers. We need your insights. All us Reds need to try and understand a little bit better what these potential new head coaches might bring to the role. And as we say, it makes absolute sense to start with Xabi Alonso. Unless you've been living under a rock, people, you'll have seen the rumours, you'll have seen the headlines. This is a daily running thing. But Dave, we want to get straight into this and get real insights, because we all love the player, but we want to know what he's going to be like as a potential, if it does happen, head coach. I mean, the place to start surely seems his style of play, this Leverkusen team. What can you tell us about his team, how they're doing, and the way they set up?
So the first thing to remember is who he was as a player and the style of play that he brought to a team. So that passing style, that possession-based style, that patience, that discipline, and that intelligence. And when you watch his team play, you can see his teachings in that team. Now, his Leverkusen team has evolved since he took over. He replaced, he took over in October of 2022, replacing Gerardo Sione after Leverkusen had a bad start to the season. And initially he worked with a back four, and then he bridged it into a back three. 2 in the middle, 2 wing backs, nice and compact. Built the structure from that. Started integrating the way he wanted them to play. The forward line is what took a little bit of time to figure out, because last season with Patrick Schick being injured, not having recognised number 9 available to him, he was having to do different things. Oftentimes he'd play Florian Wirtz as a 10 with 2 wingers basically playing as a front pair, but they'd split wide and they wouldn't really play with a striker. Sometimes he'd play Wirtz as an out-and-out false 9 with 2 real wide forwards. Sometimes he'd go with 2 behind 1. This year, he has settled in on 2 behind 1. So it's a 3-4-2-1. When his team have possession, there's a couple of really notable things that you see. You see how lopsided his wing-backs get. So Alex Grimaldo, who they signed from Benfica in the summer, plays that left wing-back role. And he's tremendous at getting forward. He's a great crosser of the ball. But Alonso is using him in a really interesting way where he almost inverts him into midfield for his additional possession. His passing in the short range is outstanding. And by doing that, and by having Piero Hincapié as the left side centre-back who can cheat across, he's basically able to go to a 3-3 with most often Tapsoba, Ta, and Hincapié as a back 3, and then Palacios, Granit Xhaka, and Grimaldo as a 3. He will allow Jeremy Frimpong, the right wing back, to basically play as an out-and-out right winger, to play as high up the field as possible. And that gives him a 3-3-3 because you get Frimpong, you get Jonas Hoffmann, and you get Florian Wirtz behind Victor Boniface. So the 3-4-2-1 becomes a 3-3-3-1. But that's not all it does, because Grimaldo doesn't just step into midfield and stay there. He also has license to get high and wide when the opportunity presents itself, based on game flow. He allows Grimaldo to almost have that freedom to play that role whichever way he wants. If the game dictates that Leverkusen need him high and wide, or that there's opportunities for him to get high and wide if there's potentially a ropey fullback, he allows Grimaldo to have that freedom to go either narrow and deep or high and wide, depending on what the opposition are doing, depending on where the space is. You'll often see Hincapié step into midfield as well when he plays that left side centre-back role. So sometimes it becomes a 2 at the back with Tapsoba and Ta, with a 3 in front, Palacios, Xhaka and Hincapié, and then it's almost like a 4 behind the front man, because Grimaldo will be high and wide on the left, Frimpong high and wide on the right, Hoffmann and Wirtz in the dual number 10 roles, and Boniface as the 9.
Oh.
So it is a flexible system. Now, in terms of how they play, they do rely heavily on the press out of possession. They're not a team that retreats into their shell when they lose the ball. So you're not going to see them lose the ball high up and then immediately sprint back to get into a set defensive scheme. That's not going to happen. But they're not as aggressive in their pressing as we are. Their press is it's a far more Spanish press. It's the Guardiola press rather than the Klopp press. And I know that when Xabi has talked about it, he's referred to it as gegenpressing. That's more for the purpose of the German media than for an accurate description of what the team is doing. They press more patiently than we do. They are more measured in their pressing than we are. You rarely see the kind of chain press from them. It's more about, we're going to let you have the ball. We're going to let you have the ball, and when the right person gets it in the right area, then we're going to come and take it off you. Or we're going to let you have possession, and then we're going to let you make a mistake. So they're not as high intensity, they're not as aggressive as us in their press. So that's one thing to know, because I've seen a lot of people talk about, oh, well, it's the pressing style. So like that suits, it's a very different press than what we do. There are certain holes in their press as well, where just because of the nature of the shape and certain players that he has in the team, like Xhaka and Palacios, for example, they're not the quickest on the turn. Grimaldo and Frimpong, they're quite small players. And when they get really high up, teams do tend to clip the ball in behind the pair of them, knowing that the two centre midfielders aren't the most fleet-footed to get out and cover. Now, when it's down Leverkusen's left, it's less of an issue because Hincapié is probably more naturally a left back than a centre back anyway. So he's more than happy to get out there. He's more than quick enough to get there. The other side is the weaker spot because Tapsoba is a pure centre back and Frimpong is not a good defender. And he obviously plays high and wide almost exclusively. So there can be space to exploit there. But again, that's something we're used to because we often have that space behind Trent. That's an area teams target. So nothing to really worry about there. In possession, they play a fairly high-risk style. It's very similar to the Brighton possession. It's a lot of patience in the first phase, drawing the opposition on, short passes back and forth between your defence and your midfield, not being afraid to play it backwards when the moment needs it, not forcing passes until the opportunity is there where it becomes a high percentage force, as opposed to let's play this 10% ball through a gap that isn't really there and risk getting turned over. What you see with them is it's almost like a team playing in normal speed and then all of a sudden it gets turned up to like 3 times speed as they hit a trigger where a certain player in the opposition team bites on a pass and all of a sudden now there's a gap. So now we're going to very quickly move it through the phases and we're going to take advantage of that space. That's the area we're now attacking. It is very similar to what De Zerbi does. Very, very similar to what De Zerbi does. Build slowly through the middle and then explode into the wide areas. In De Zerbi's case, it's mostly down the left, using Estupinan and Mitoma. In Leverkusen's case, it's almost exclusively down the right that the explosion comes, with Jonas Hoffmann shifting wide and Frimpong dovetailing with him. It's interesting to watch. It's obviously a system that's producing a lot of goals for them this season. 52 goals in 20 league matches is a pretty good return, especially when you factor in that Boniface, their primary number 9, has missed a number of games recently. But they're scoring in all competitions, which is what impresses me, because it's one thing to do it in one competition. They're doing it across the board. They've got 52 in the league. They've got 19 in just 4 cup games, and they got 19 in their 6 Europa League group stage games. So 90 goals in 30 games, an average of 3 goals a game, is really, really impressive. And what I also really like is how shared out the goals have been. You've got Boniface with 16, Grimaldo getting 9, Wirtz with 8, Hoffmann with 7, Frimpong with 7. So he's got 16 goals from his wing backs.
Wow.
That's more than the 2 behind the striker have got. They've got a combined 15. He's got 6 from Jonathan Tah, who's a centre-back. Again, mostly set pieces, but still. Patrick Schick, the backup striker, has 6. Amin Adli, who's a rotation player, has 6. Adam Hlozik, Nathan Tella, 6 and 5. He's gotten 5 from Palacios in midfield, 3 from Tapsoba, who's the other kind of mainstay centre-back, 1 from Hincapié, but he did miss a chunk of the season as well. 1 from Kusunu, who's the other sort of rotation centre-back. So he's getting goals from everywhere. They're not heavily reliant on one player. Like I said, 52 goals in the league. Their top scorer only has 10. So that's a really good sign. Yeah. That's something, again, that suits us, a team that has a lot of goal-scoring options. And, like, you look at the thing, like I was saying with Grimaldo, he'll drop in and play central. And he'll be involved in the build-up, and he'll ping the ball about, and he'll help them keep it. And it's all very patient, and it's all very good. And then they'll explode down the right, and he has full license then to get himself in the box, to be that back post runner. that we often see a midfielder being. With Alonso, he has both wing backs in the mindset of, if the ball is on the other side of the pitch, attack the box and don't hold the width. Attack the goal. Get yourself in position that when that cross comes in, you're not just retrieving the cross to get it back in, that you can get on the end of that cross. And both fullbacks or wing backs have had great success in that regard this year.
Wow. I mean, yeah, the numbers, like you say, across the board, fascinating. I mean, it's even that phrase you use, the way they explode, the formation, the expectations, some similarities and some differences. And that is what I want to explore and be honest about here, Dave, because we know in this series we're talking about head coaches. There's never going to be a perfect Jurgen Klopp replacement. And Xabi's CV is an interesting one, because you talked about before, what people quote. And I see one, no doubt you've seen it, comes up quite often. This is his first real season. But actually, that's not really true, is it, when you look at the CV? And also, there is pros and cons to looking at his full career. So how do you see it with his CV?
When Cynthia came to TurboTax, she had just launched her new side gig, a true crime podcast.
I'm a first-rate detective with a golden voice.
As her TurboTax expert, I made her second income count by guaranteeing 100% accurate filing and her maximum refund.
What did she do with that refund? Find out next week.
Switch to Intuit TurboTax and make your moves count. See guarantee details at turbotax.com/guarantees. Experts only available with TurboTax Live.
True or false? Hats make you go bald. This is actually false. Maybe still skip the fedora, though. Hair loss is a genetic condition that affects 2 out of 3 men by the age of 35. Those aren't great odds. But the good news is that Keeps can help with expert, personalized care and science-backed treatments that are up to 90% effective at reducing hair loss. All without leaving the house, delivered straight to your door. Hair loss stops with Keeps. For a special offer to get started, go to keeps.com/podcast. That's KEEPS.com/podcast.
Look, as far as him as a manager, you are working with a small sample size. I know he had 3 years with Real Sociedad B. When you look at the raw numbers for that, 98 games, only 40 wins, 140 goals scored, which is decent, 120 conceded, which is bad, like flat out bad. That's not great. He did get a promotion, which is good. But there was 2 other seasons there where it was fairly average. But here's why you can't really take much from it from a negative point of view. Here's why you don't look at 120 goals conceded and go, okay, well, he was clearly struggling to coach a defence. When you're coaching a B team in Spain, you are at the whim of the A team manager consistently. You don't know what players you're going to have week to week to week. Because if there's an injury in the first team or poor form in the first team, one of your players is getting plucked. If you have a player who excels, he's getting plucked. Because the club functions for the A team. So while Alonso was at Real Sociedad B, what he was doing was he was in pure development mode. Number one, he was developing players for the first team. That's the primary job of a B team manager in Spain. Same thing has been the under-21s manager for Liverpool. Your primary job is to develop players for the first team. And results are a secondary issue. The other thing he was doing was he was developing himself and he was experimenting with ideas. And we saw him at Real Sociedad play a back 4, play a back 3. At times he played a full-on back 5 because he was trying to figure out what he wanted to do, what would work with how he viewed his team playing. What is the best shape for me to get the maximum results using the style of play that I want? Because the system is what matters here. The shape is secondary because the shape changes during the game. Like when you watch a team play and they have possession, their shape is not the same as it is when they don't have the ball. So for him, it was a bit of figuring things out, a bit of what does give us the most solidity if we lose the ball. what's the easiest way for us to A, recover a shape, and B, be able to press out of possession? And the truth of it is the back three makes that easier. If you consider back three and one in front, then you have 6 players to go and try and win the ball back with, but you still got that bank of 4 that you can protect your team with. Now, when we were great under Klopp, we had a bank of 4, but we had a 2 and a 2. We had Matip or Gomez and Virgil and Fabinho and Gini that would sit in front. And Fab would drop in as a centre-back as and when needed, either to the right, the left, or in the middle. And the other 2 could split. And Gini could sit in front of them. But we always had that bank of 4. But the more common way to do that is a 1 and a 3. And that's basically what he goes with, is a 1 and a 3. 3 that sit, 1 sits in front, and we defend as a bank of 4. I mentioned earlier with Hincapié, he'll often step into midfield, and that will allow Granit Xhaka to push further on if he wants to, but they'll still have Hincapié and Palacios in front of Ta and in front of Tapsoba, which gives them a block of 4 to defend with. So if they get turned over, it means they're not just fresh meat on a counter-attack. It means that they're not going to get massively outnumbered on a counter. You're always going to have 4 sitting in. So you have that solid base. And he figured that out as he went along through his journey at Real Sociedad. He played some mad systems at Real Sociedad. Like, he played 2 centre-backs at one point and inverted both full-backs in front of them. So he had a 2-2. And then his midfield would be a flat 4, and he had 2 up front. But his wingers would basically have the entire flanks. Now, again, this is more experimentation. This was also to give those young wingers that he had at Sociedad a sense of defensive responsibility, while also having the safety of that block of 4. But it meant that as well, he could allow his midfielders to play with more freedom. He could allow them to express themselves in terms of their passing, in terms of their ball carrying, knowing that at least behind them there was that protective group. So I think you don't take anything too much from Sociedad in terms of results for certain. I don't think you take anything from that. Yeah. I don't think you take too much from the different shapes he used, because, again, a lot of it is experimentation. A lot of it is figuring things out just for himself. Like, he might have just one evening thought, I wonder what this would look like. And being a B team manager, he has the freedom to go out and see what it looks like in a real game situation. Like, if he wanted to maybe, like, not saying he did, because I didn't see every game, obviously, he coached. I didn't see the majority of games he coached, just a handful. But you read everything that's out there from the different blogs and the different fan sites and whoever, and you find as much information. You talk to Sociedad fans that would have watched those games. But, like, if he had just decided on a whim, I wonder what it would look like if I went with the old Italian doorbolt system of playing an actual sweeper and 3 stoppers in front of them. People would say in the modern game that's madness because with the offside rule and VAR, you don't do that. But when you're a B team coach, you can get away with that type of stuff. And you can just scratch the itch of, I wonder what this would look like. You don't end up having to do something mad like say, Chris Wilder, who pulled that system out about 4 years ago in the Championship, got beaten, and then said he just wanted to see what it looked like. So, you know, you can experiment. So most of what he did at Sociedad was experiment. What he's done at Leverkusen is what we should be really looking at in terms of how does he like his team to play? How does he set them up? How do they attack? How do they build? And obviously, what do they look like out of possession? Leverkusen is where we take that from. And the primary thing he's done at Leverkusen is the back 3. So when I see people say, oh, he's not going to do that at Liverpool, he's just adapting to what he has, that's just not true. He didn't decide to go to a back 3 at Leverkusen just to adapt to what he had, because at times he was having to use 3 right-footed centre-backs at Leverkusen, which isn't ideal. So that wasn't just a whim or a, this is what I'm going to do because these are the players I have. That's what he did because that's what he wanted to do. He went and targeted Alex Grimaldo purposely in the summer. You don't do that if you're not going to play wing-backs, you know?
Yeah.
He's playing this way because this is how he wants to play. And if he comes to Liverpool, he should continue to play the same way. He should continue to employ a back three. And the bigger thing people will learn very quickly is that a back three is not a defensive shape. A back three is a more attacking shape than a back four. It just is. Because you can be more aggressive with your midfield and your full-backs in particular with a back three.
Wow. I mean, if this is Xabi's style, the back three, as you said, the more aggressive style, and he's had that experimentation time, he's developed himself, he's used it wisely by the sounds of it as a B team manager. The fan perspective, he will be bought into. We've zero doubt about that. They will love him. There might be a few, as you mentioned, who are like back three, is it horses for courses? But you expect the fans to fully buy into that. From his personality, Dave, and obviously what he brings for Liverpool, that's fine. How do you think the players will receive that for him? And do you think he'll be bought into if he does go on, like we say, to change it to this back three and this more aggressive style?
Well, the first thing to say is that we have a very good squad for a back three. Like we've got a great squad to play his style, and we'll come back to that. But we have a great squad to shift to what he wants to do. Needs a couple of additions, but it needs a couple of additions right now to be the best version of what Jurgen wants to do. So the idea that it would take a complete overhaul is utter nonsense. It's actually an easier transition to go to a back three in his shape in terms of what you'd need to bring in than for him to try and play his style of football in more of a Klopp shape. In terms of will the players buy into him, he carries a lot of gravitas because he's Xabi Alonso. So that's the first thing. He is a widely respected player who had an incredible career, won everything. He won an FA Cup and a Champions League with us. He won a La Liga title with Real. He won a Champions League with Real. He won 3 straight Bundesligas with Bayern. He won a World Cup and 2 European Championships with Spain. So he can walk into any room with any player, put his medals on the table and go, right, this is what I've done. What have you done?
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is,
I don't need a VPN. I've got nothing to hide. This is what I used to tell myself before I hooked up with LibertyShield.com. Not only is my home internet now fully encrypted, but I can now access all the websites I want, whenever I want, and do so from absolutely anywhere. As a Liverpool fan, I love to know I can now watch every match, regardless of whether it's on UK TV or not. My Liberty Shield VPN makes sure nothing is blocked and guarantees me super fast streaming speed throughout that match. You can get connected right now with their software package, which includes a 48-hour no-obligation free trial and instant access to their apps for Apple, Android, Fire TV, PC, Mac and Android TV. Or go a step further like I have and get one of their pre-configured VPN routers. These small but powerful devices allow you to easily connect every device in your home to VPN, making it the perfect solution for smart TVs, Mac boxes and games consoles. Visit LibertyShield.com today and use coupon code AIVPN25 to get 25% off at checkout.
He's a very intelligent person, and everybody is aware of that. And he talks about football in a way where he's clearly dumbing it down for the person he's talking to. He's not talking in the highbrow manner that we see with certain managers. A certain German manager that's been loosely linked to us in this last couple of weeks since Jurgen announced that he was leaving, is well known for not being able to communicate his point to players. Xabi is the type who I think, and we saw it when he was a player, and we heard it from his managers when he was a player, he can communicate his ideas to anybody, no matter their level of understanding. And I think having that ability will help him. He'll be able to find the right tone for the group And then he'll be able to find the right tone for the individuals. Certain players, like, for example, if Thiago did stay, Alonso and him could talk about it on a very high level. But there'll be certain players that just don't have that high understanding of the game, that kind of genius mind. And he can bring it down and he can relate to them in a manner in which they will get. So, like, he is that kind of professor type, do you know?
Yeah.
He will be a great teacher. I have no doubts that his personality would work with the squad. What I will say is he's a totally different personality to Jurgen. And people have talked about, you know, the big reason to get him is the emotional connection.
Yeah.
That's a myth. That's a myth. There is no emotional connection with Alonso in the way there's an emotional connection with Jurgen. There just isn't. He's not that type of personality. The emotion people have with Alonso is that he played for us. And frankly, I think that aspect has been hugely overblown. He was here 5 years. He had one great season, after which he forced his way out of the club, which people seem to have just forgotten, that he forced his way to Real Madrid. He had 2 very poor years when he was with us as well, which again, people have completely forgotten, that he was a passenger for 2 seasons. And he had 2 good seasons. He wasn't this incredible world-class player for his entire 5 years at Liverpool. He just wasn't. He didn't always get on all that well with Rafa Benitez. Benitez tried to replace him with Gareth Barry at one point, let's not forget. The year before, 2 years before, Xabi actually left. So his time at Liverpool is looked at in a lot shinier and rosier of a light than it really should be. He was very good for us, but he wasn't this exceptional elite player that he would later become at Real Madrid week after week, year after year. He just wasn't. And I know he's talked very fondly about Liverpool, and that's always been nice to hear, that he feels that connection to the club and the city. I would ask, though, how many times has he been back to the city other than for games? Like, has he ever just come back for a weekend? Because other players have. Do you know what I mean? So I do wonder if there's a little bit of the connection that's a little bit hammed up. Now, not saying he doesn't have it, not saying he doesn't feel strongly for the club, but at the same time, I think people are falsely buying into a narrative that's been created post Liverpool career with some of the interviews, some of the social media stuff. The other thing I'll say as well is this idea that he knows the club. He left 15 years ago. It's a totally different club. It's different owners. It's entirely different staff. It's entirely different players. It's a different training ground. It's a totally different club. So this idea of this connection, like, it's an awfully long time ago since he was at the club. An awfully long time ago. And it's not like he was at the club for 10 or 15 years. He was there 5 years. So I do think people have put far too much on that and not looked enough at the manager. Because Xabi's not coming to play for us. Now, the signs are that as a manager, he's very promising. But that's all they are. Signs promising. Not proven great, not even proven very good. Signs. You could go to very promising if you want. Like, potentially he could be incredible. You look at who he's worked under, you looked at the type of person he is and the fact that he does appear like he's a sponge who will have learned really well from Vicente Del Bosque, from Mourinho, from Pep, like 3 of the best managers of all time. He played under Rafa, obviously, as well, another good manager. So you'll have learned from all of them. But at the same time, he's going to have to be his own man. And we still don't have, as yet, a big enough body of work to fully know what he's going to be. And the biggest negative for me, we have no idea how he is against adversity. None. He has never had to deal with adversity in his managerial career. Never, not once. He took over a club that were... There's this idea that he took them from the relegation spots to top of the league. They finished third the season before he took over, okay? They finished third. They had a really good team. They had a really bad start, largely because of injuries. He took over with no real pressure under him. He had a good start, a bit of a wobble December into January, but not like a catastrophic run. No back-to-back defeats, no 3 defeats in a row or anything like that. And it was a bit of a mixed bag down the back half. Like, they won 4 in a row, then they lost 2 of 4, won back-to-back, lost and drew to Bochum, who were crap. He's never had to deal with adversity. We don't know how he would react to losing 3 games in a row. We don't know how he'd react to a major injury crisis. We don't know how he'd react if one of his best players was sold and he had to replace him, or maybe wasn't given the opportunity to replace him. We don't know how any of these things would impact him. So it's a lot of guesswork. So when I see people say, well, he's the clear front runner, I have to ask the question, why? And if the answer is, well, because he's Xabi Alonso and he played for us, I'm sorry, then that's not a real reason. That's not a reason to appoint him as manager. We need to take the emotion out of this. The last time an emotional Liverpool appointment was made was when Kenny Dalglish was given the job on a full-time basis. Yeah. And that was a disaster. It was a disaster, an unmitigated disaster. I don't care that we won a League Cup. I don't care that we got to the Cup final. Our form in the back half of that season would have had us relegated. It was a disaster. We were a mess.
Yeah, it is a question, isn't it, for people to balance their own minds versus their logic. But he does seem the appointed king choice there by many. I mean, I do want to go back to the bit you said there, because I kind of hooked onto that. We've got the squad for the back 3, but we may need additions. Like Klopp needs additions, as you said there. Dave, whenever a new head coach, manager, whatever you want to put, comes in, there's always in brass tacks winners and losers in the existing squad, because some, will flourish, who may be stunted their growth, whatever you want to call it, whereas some, it doesn't work out, a new personality, whatever you want to call it. Who are you kind of pegging right now for potential winners and losers if it is Xabi?
In terms of people that would be immediate winners, I think Virgil in the middle of a back 3 with pace either side would allow him to extend his career significantly. I think Trent would very much enjoy playing under Alonso because So to run it out, right? Ali will be the goalkeeper. We know that. That's brilliant. Your back 3, you're looking at Ibu, Virgil, +1. That's the one addition we'd need in the back 3 is the left-sided one. So in terms of depth, Gomez would be the backup across all 3 spots. The first one on deck for all 3 spots. Quansah, obviously, as a backup to Virgil. And I think Luke Chambers would be a winner here as well, because I think he'd become the backup left side option. Now, if that's saying if Gomez has to play right side and the left side one is also out, Chambers gets the call. If Gomez is playing right side or left side and Virgil is out, Quansah gets the call. But Gomez's first call, then the other 2. But that's one defender needed to have a really strong group of 6 in there. Trent as the right wing back. Now, there's some suggestion he'd play in central midfield. I don't see it. Not the way Alonso uses his midfielders. He doesn't have the discipline. And Alonso wants short passing from his midfielders. lots and lots of short, quick passing, which isn't Trent's game. The Grimaldo role, but on the other side, is what I see for Trent. That ability to step into midfield, to play as a midfielder, but also retain that freedom to get forward and also play high and wide. I think it's perfect for Trent. We would need a new left wing back, a starter. Andy Robertson will be a fine backup, but we'd need a starter. We'd need somebody that can be a real road runner, a whippet, a final third, creative monster, really. Someone like Frimpong, but on the other side. Ian Maatsen of Chelsea would fit that really well. Now, he's not lightning quick, but he's quick enough. Maatsen would be great. That'll solve that. Central midfield, Alexis will love playing from. Like, it's tailor-made for Alexis, really. The other one we'd need to add, we know we need a midfielder anyway. This is not news to anybody. We need another midfielder. But if you had, say, Martin Zubimendi, who he had at Sociedad and brought him in, and you go Zubimendi and Alexis as your starters, and then Curtis is kind of a third starter who can rotate with both of them, well, then you've got three outstanding starting options for two roles. You've got Endo as a situational defensive midfielder when you need him, and then you've got Bajcetic and Clark to develop slowly, bring along carefully. They would love to play in those roles, and I think he'd love both of them. And in time, he'd develop them both into, I think, very good players. So there's your three needs. Left side centre-back, one in midfield, predominantly more of a defensive midfielder, but one who is very, very strong on the ball, which is why Zubimendi makes perfect sense. And then a really, really attack-minded left wing-back. In attack, I don't think we need to do anything. You've got Mo and Dominic in the Hoffman and Wirtz roles. Not the same type of players, but those roles would absolutely be perfect. Mo being able to balance his creative side and his goal-scoring side while playing narrow in half spaces would be sensational. Dominic would explode in that role. It'd be unbelievable. And then Darwin up front with depth of Harvey, Gakpo and Jota. The two names I haven't mentioned who I think would be the odd people out. One is Gravenberch and the other is Diaz. Diaz because he doesn't use wide players. Now, Diaz potentially could be electric in one of those roles, in the Jonas Hoffman role. So maybe it's Diaz, Gakpo and Jota are the backup to Salah, Sabo and Darwin. And Harvey's just a rotation player who maybe takes a step back or maybe has to go on loan to get more regular football. Gravenberch is the one I just have a really hard time finding a role for because he doesn't play well in a double pivot. Now, in an Alonso double pivot with wing backs either side and a back three, there is less defensive responsibility, but Xabi is very demanding of what he wants off the ball. And Gravenberch's notions of what to do off the ball are not great. Like, he doesn't have good defensive instincts at all. He doesn't have a good defensive work ethic. He's obviously good on the ball. His passing can be a little bit loose at times, and sometimes he'll try passes that are outside of his own capabilities. But I mean, if anyone's going to teach him how to be a midfielder, it's probably Alonso. And that's the issue for Gravenberch, is nobody's really just harnessed him yet. He's sort of, at Ajax, was allowed to just exist on talent alone and explore the realms of his own talent. That did not go over well at Bayern when they tried to harness him and make him part of a team. Thus far, it seems like Klopp and Linders are allowing him to play a little bit outside the system in the hopes that they can get him to buy in and then they can kind of bring him back. The problem is they're both leaving in the summer. So I don't know. I don't know what Alonso would do with him. There's certainly no starting role for him. And in terms of depth, I just think Curtis is a better option. Endo's a better option. And long term, I think Bajcetic and Bobby Clark are better options for how Alonso plays. He would be the one I would say I have a really hard time picturing in the Alonso team.
Interesting. Yeah, people will be thinking about that, especially with, as you say, the two almost number 10s behind the front man. Where would he fit in? But listen, we'll have to see if we do get these questions answered in the future, sliding doors style moments. I mean, the final one I do want to ask is, and you know about this as well as anyone, but we all discuss it, we all see it. What's the structure? What are FSG going to do? Sporting directors, analytics, etc., etc. You know, we're in it daily. If it is as we suspect, let's put it this way, that it is very much the sporting analysis, the holistic approach with the scouting team, Will Spearman, etc., everything coming together. Do you think there'd be any issue with Alonso fitting in with that, and the sporting director probably, I'm saying probably, Dave, having more sort of power in regards to transfers? Can you see any issue with that at all for him?
No, not with him, because if you think about his career, he played, after leaving us, he played for two clubs who operate a very, very strict sporting director controls the transfer side of things policy, Real and Bayern. Managers have little to no impact in transfers at Real. Some do at Bayern, depending. Thomas Tuchel has a bit too much, but because of them, when he took over, they were also sacking everybody else, like Brazo and all of the rest were getting gone. And Tuchel was just sort of able to carve out a little bit of power long term. But when Xabi was there under Pep would have had strong impact because he's Pep. But the final decisions were still being made above Pep's head. At Real Sociedad, Roberto Olabe is the sporting director and has been for 6-7 years now. And he runs that club quite tight. Like there's impact from the first team manager, whose name is absolutely Alquicil. Yeah, that's him, isn't it? Alquicil is the manager there. I think it is anyway. Either way, Olabe runs the club. He is the one who makes the final decision. So Alonso came through there in terms of coaching. And since going to Leverkusen, it's the same thing. I mean, Simon Rolfs is the ultimate decision maker. Nothing happens without his say-so. Will Alonso have input? Absolutely. But more of his input will be, this is what I need. These are the characteristics I'm looking for.
Right.
So, for example, with Granit Xhaka, he was looking for a controlling midfielder, comfortable on the ball, strong defensive instincts from a positional standpoint, wasn't necessarily looking for an athlete. He was looking for experience. He was looking for leadership. Well, they're all things that Granit Xhaka provides. Leadership, a little bit questionable given some of the antics at Arsenal. But he was captain of Arsenal. He's been captain of Switzerland on a bunch of occasions. He's got bags of experience. He played in the Bundesliga. And he is, regardless of anything else, very, very comfortable on the ball. He's very, very good on the ball. And we're seeing it with him this season. Xhaka has been tremendous. You know, when he went looking for a left wing back, he will have described what he wanted. And Alex Grimaldo's what they'll have come back with. The same thing with Jonas Hoffmann. He didn't go to them and say, get me Jonas Hoffmann. He went and he asked for a player with those characteristics, those attributes. And Jonas Hoffmann was what they found. Same with Victor Boniface. They'd been looking at Boniface for 2 years, as a number of clubs had been. But when Xabi described what he wanted in a striker, Victor Boniface was the one that came up. So I think he's very much going to be comfortable working in the sporting director structure. I think he'll be very comfortable putting his faith in both the sports science department, which Jurgen hasn't always, and the data department, which again, Jurgen hasn't always. So I do think Xabi, as a younger manager, a more modern, recently retired player, Like, think of it from Jurgen's point of view. When Jurgen retired as a player in 2000, like, sports science wasn't a thing that people talked about on a huge scale. Neither was analytics. Like, these weren't things that were really brought up in mainstream discussion about football. Now they are. Now they are heavily. Now, in Germany, sports science was quite prevalent, but they weren't things Jurgen would have been hugely exposed to as a player. So he had to sort of adapt to them as he went along. And he's obviously always had his grumblings and mumblings about different things. But for Alonso, he played in the era where those things became so prevalent. And he was immersed in them from early. Like, he will have had at Real Madrid and at Bayern meetings with analysts and meetings with sports science people who are going over this, look, if you play this pass against this team, this is something that works for you. If you do this, if you watch this runner and where he goes, like, these are things that Xabi will have been far more aware of as a player than an older manager like Jurgen would have been. So it's an easier transition for him as a manager to accept them. The other thing as well is Jurgen Klopp arrived at the club as Jurgen Klopp, 2-time Bundesliga winner with Borussia Dortmund.
Yeah.
One of the best managers in the world with 15 years of experience to his name. So he came in and was able to sort of not push things around, but he was able to just sort of say, I'm going to do this my way and you're going to adapt to my way. Alonso, even if he wins the Bundesliga this year, still won't have that. He still won't have that. So he is going to have to adapt to what Liverpool want to do. And I think he'll have no problems. I genuinely don't think he'd have any problems doing it.
Wow. Ladies and gents, a lot of info, a lot of insight around Xabi Alonso, back threes, explosion, working with sporting directors. There is a lot of things we've hopefully given you in that podcast. So all it really leaves me to say is, Mr. Hendrick, thanks for your time and your insight. It's much appreciated as ever, sir.
No problem at all.
That, ladies and gents, was the first for the next dance.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.
Sports Social Podcast Network.